Hello ladies and gentlemen, GamingMedley here, and today I'm going to be talking about my thoughts and opinions on the Star Wars Battlefront Beta. Yes, that's right, another late YouTube video talking about Battlefront. Who's excited? No one? Well, I'm still gonna do it. In all seriousness, I'm going to try and provide a bit more critique than a lot of videos I've been seeing on this topic, so maybe you'll get some value out of it if you haven't played the beta. Not likely, but possible. I'm a pretty big fanboy. I've read the extended universe of books for Star Wars, etc., so hopefully I'll be able to provide some interesting insights. First, I'll talk about the things that I thought worked well, then the things that I thought were average and I didn't really have an opinion on, and finally I'll talk about the things that I think could use improvement. Let's begin. So, what worked well? Firstly, the graphics are amazing. The game boasted some of the most realistic snow effects I've ever seen in a video game on the Hoth map, with the sparkles and the snow glare, and the Sullust map had amazing environmental effects with the space battle raging in the background. The game made you feel like you were playing a Star Wars movie. The ships looked great, the lasers looked great, the textures were good for the most part, etc. It's a beautiful game just like most games DICE makes. Secondly, the sound quality was top-notch. Gaming cuts out an entire sense and smell, and I don't know if people really know how hard it is to compensate for that. The sound and environmental design of this game made me completely immersed in it to the point that I felt like I could imagine the smells those boiling pits on Sullust gave off, or the burned ozone the lasers from the AT-AT would have caused on Hoth. Yes, they're the same sounds that we all know and love from the original trilogy. They're like 40 years old, but they don't sound dated, and it conveys a sense of Star Wars perfectly. The music is amazing as well, featuring your favorite soundtracks that mesh with the battle noises perfectly to create a stunning cinematic experience, so those things worked well. As for what I thought was mediocre, the shooting was extremely average. The guns have infinite ammo as opposed to a normal reload system, which makes sense but at the same time removes any sense of having to conserve ammo from the game. It's not uncommon to see people attempting to snipe each other with pistols from across the map, which most people wouldn't attempt in other shooters. Canonically it works, but it removes one element, namely ammo conservation, from the game and doesn't really add anything to make up for it. The game lacks any of the pizzazz that we're seeing other FPSs like Black Ops 3 put in with, say, wall running, and the only unlock that allowed you extra mobility was a jetpack that you unlocked through the progression system in the game. Speaking of which, although I didn't personally have problems with the progression system, I didn't think that it was done well. The progression system works by unlocking cards. These cards unlock things like thermal detonators, which are grenades, jetpacks, sniper rifles, personal shields, etc. The problem I had with it was that there were a few clear winners. Everyone I saw took the cycler rifle, aka the sniper rifle, with them because it's an extremely powerful weapon capable of dealing significant amounts of damage. I took out an AT-ST with this thing and a TIE fighter with it after a few passes, and it only has a 10-second cooldown. In addition, because there's not a sniper blaster in the game at the moment, with the heavy blaster being the longest range weapon in the game, if you want real long range viability, you've got to pick up the cycler rifle. The personal shield was good on the capture and hold map, obviously, and the thermal detonator was of course an auto pick. I personally didn't see anybody using any unlocks except for the cycler rifle, personal shield, and thermal detonator, except for maybe like 3 or 4 guys using jetpacks. The power-ups were fairly dull as well, only being exciting if you happen to pick up a ship that you'll quickly grow to hate or a hero power-up. The heroes, speaking of which, are frustratingly buggy. I also hated how they just took a knee when they were defeated instead of like force leaping out of battle or something. Having them force leap away would have been a much better way to remove them from the battle, since they just kind of kneel down and then disappear, which ends up in most players shooting at already defeated heroes with the assumption, if I can still see them, they must be alive. The guns were fairly average as well. I didn't love any of them, on the other hand I didn't hate them either. They were serviceable, but none of them had any personality or customization, which is uncommon for an FPS where guns typically determine entire playstyles. Yes, the different blasters had differing strengths and weaknesses. Some of them were better at longer ranges, some of them had quicker firing rates and were better at close range, but none of it really seemed to matter that much in the long run. As for what I thought the game could improve upon, well, there were a lot of things. One was classes, or namely lack thereof. There currently aren't any classes such as sniper, medic, engineer, what have you. Even canonically, this doesn't make sense. There are multiple types of stormtroopers as well as specialized rebel fighters in the Star Wars universe, and not having the option to play as these different types of soldiers only removes customization and choices in playstyle from the game. You can customize how your character will look in the final build, although this feature wasn't in the beta, but since that doesn't change gameplay in any way, it doesn't really matter to me. Flying is also horrible. The ships move incredibly fast compared to the map size, and they're incredibly unresponsive as well, meaning you had better have a good idea of where you want to be before you make your pass, because one pass is all you're going to get. The minigame for snow speeders to take out the AT-AT on the Hoth map is extremely bullshitty and essentially requires you to play like a mobile game, which is very disorienting and takes you out of the experience when you're in the middle of this huge cinematic battle. Why not simply have you continue to circle it instead? It was a gameplay decision that I heard nothing but negative feedback about from other players. Most people seem to hate flying ships, so I hope that changes before the game is released, although chances of that happening are slim to none. Speaking of the Hoth map, holy shit, the balance is so far off on that thing that a drunk elephant would have more luck trying to stand on a toothpick with one leg than a rebel soldier would trying to get a positive or neutral KD on that map. Look, I understand the asymmetrical game design, and that's fine. The purpose of the map is to sacrifice yourself to stop the AT-ATs if you're playing rebels, and I love that. But take KD out of that map. Rebel players will always have extremely negative KDs, and although it doesn't actually affect the game that much, it causes undue negativity from players. In addition, spawn points need to be reworked. The spawn points are related to where the AT-ATs are, meaning that if you're able to get behind the rebel spawns as an Imperial while the AT-ATs haven't progressed very far, you're able to spawn camp like a motherfucker. And yes, I'm aware I'm switching between AT-AT and AT-AT. Just depends on how I'm feeling. Unfortunately, I can't say that the capture and hold gameplay on Solist was all that much more amazing. Although less infuriating than Hoth, after a few games it became painfully apparent just how little the game had to offer in terms of actually giving you a fun and varied experience. And that's ultimately my biggest complaint with the game, is just how dull it is. The shooting was generic, there was no variety of classes or weapons, so you couldn't specialize your playstyle, and the flying had more bad aspects than good. The game's great if you want a quick and casual Star Wars experience, but if you want to play this game for a long enough time to justify spending $60 on it, drastic changes are going to have to take place between this beta and release, which is unlikely at best. This game is extremely casual, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Plenty of people who haven't played lots of FPSs will probably be picking this up because it's Star Wars, and as a Babby's first FPS, it serves up a polished, visually stunning experience that adequately covers up just how dull the actual game is. But to anyone who likes playing shooters or plays a lot of shooters, that dullness is uncovered as soon as you play a few games, amounting to an overall less satisfying experience than other FPS this is competing with. The strength of this game lies in battles with large numbers of people, but Hoth is the only map that really offers that, even if we take into account the game modes being released with the game that weren't in the beta. And unless that map is balanced, it won't even have that going for it. Battlefront relies on its spectacle and theme to be fun, and once those things disappear within a few hours, it's hard to justify spending those $60 of hard-earned money on a game that ultimately offers less in the way of replayability and variety than pretty much every other FPS game out there. If it was a $40 game or a $30 game, I'd be fine with it, but I currently think $60 is at least $20 too much for the experience you get out of the game. The fact that there's no campaign kills this as well for me. I understand why it would be difficult since more movies are coming out now and this is set in the movie universe, but at least a small story would have been nice. A story where you play as a stormtrooper, for example, or a rebel soldier and go through the events of the original trilogy, seeing them as a mere grunt soldier who gets promoted a few times rather than as a hero, for example, would have been awesome. It would have let you see the movies in an entirely new way and at the same time let people brush up on their knowledge of what's happened so far in the universe before they see Star Wars 7. It would also make the $60 price tag more acceptable. So in conclusion, is Star Wars Battlefront worth getting? I'd say wait on it. Unless you're a huge Star Wars fan, take a few days and see how people say it is after launch before picking it up. Occupy yourself with Fallout 4 since it's releasing like 6 days earlier than this, or any other game pretty much. Unless the gameplay sees dramatic improvements or the additions they're making to the game on launch up the value of the game drastically, and I do mean drastically, the game simply can't justify its $60 price tag. So yeah, if you've enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this every day to every other day, I suggest subscribing personally because it strokes my ego. Feel free to leave a like, a dislike, a favorite, a sub, a share, a comment, whatever you want to do and whatever you think this video deserves. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope to see you again soon. GM out.